Hello, and welcome to Making Known the Unknown. I'm your host, Tina Tarryk, and with me tonight are our experts, Sidney Schwartz, middle school teacher and Bible researcher from Hackensack, New Jersey. Welcome, Sidney.
Hi, Tina.
Who drove up in this horrendous rain tonight.
Yes.
Thank you. And Reverend Hewitt, pastor and founder of Gifts of the Spirit Church in Chesterfield, Connecticut, and medium. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you.
Okay. What's a medium, you ask? Well, we have a little clip that's been prepared to show those of our viewers out there just exactly what happens with respect to mediumship. And I also want to remind our viewers that tonight's show, as always, will be live for 1 hour, 889-1728. I know the topics are hot and they make you think, but if you have a question, give us a call. So if we could run that clip now.
In the Bible, Paul explains that everyone has two bodies, a physical body and a spiritual body. Mediums use their spiritual bodies when they act as a communication bridge between the physical and spirit worlds. As a spirit speaks, mediums hear the information using the ears of their spiritual bodies, then repeat the information to other physical people. Mediumship is synonymous with the biblical term, Gifts of the Spirit. The focus of our show, Making Known the Unknown, is to provide knowledge through the use of Reverend Hewitt's mediumship and Sidney Schwartz's research. The Bible contains the history of psychic events, along with man-made doctrines created by priests centuries ago. This show will explore the untruths which the Bible entrenched into our society. By uncovering these untruths, we encourage people everywhere to think for themselves with a critical mind.
Thank you. And we will continue to have that clip be a regular part of this show because as I find in my travels with people that I run into, many people don't know what the word medium means. And we don't use the word psychic here. And maybe at some point Carl can clarify why we don't. But medium is the more appropriate term for the type of gift that Reverend Hewitt has. Okay. Without further ado, tonight's topic, which has to do with an unusual, should I say, definition, and for 1 second I'm thinking it has to do with something referred to as God's computer. And for those of you out there who are wondering what it means with respect to becoming familiar with God's computer, you would probably naturally think of the brain. All of us think about computers comparable to the brains in our heads, but in fact, that is not at all what the term God's computer refers to. So what I'm going to do is start with Sidney Schwartz, and Sidney has some basic definitions to share with us about the soul.
Well, first of all, when I hear the word God's computer, before I learned about psychic science and mediumship, I would have thought that that's what God kept track of everybody, because according to traditional beliefs, people think that God's an old man sitting out in a piece of real estate in the sky somewhere with this big gigantic book with everybody's name in it. You know, coming from the Jewish religion, you know, we have the high holidays, and we repent for our sins during that 10-day period of time, and supposedly at the end of that evening, the God comes down and he puts a stamp on the book of life, whether or not it's going to be a person's going to live or die. So, you know, to keep track of millions of people, you would need a computer. So this is what a lot of people from a more traditional point of view might think about that term. But in actuality, it's not. God's computer is really the soul that's within us. And I'll turn it over to Reverend Hewitt to continue with that.
Okay, Carl. God's computer is our soul. How so?
Well, very few people on the planet knows where the soul is. And there's a lot of people dealing with, let's say, the hierarchy of religion. They know where the soul is, but they don't tell the people. Because as long as they don't tell the people, it's a big mystery. The soul is where the heart was originally when the soul was, when the body was created. The soul is behind the breastbone. There's a cavity in right there. That's where the heart was originally placed. We're going back probably millions of years ago.
We could show a graphic. If we could have graphic number 4 come up as Carl's explaining that, people can see exactly where it would be.
Okay, so we have a graphic of exactly where the soul is located in the
Yes.
body.
Yeah.
Okay.
The
So if you can continue.
The soul is located right behind the breastbone, and you see the dot on the screen there. That is exactly where the soul is. This is why the heart has been moved over to the left. That was done millions of years ago by the gods. That's plural. That created the body. The heart is only a pump. That's all it is pump.
Okay.
And when a person feels something emotional,
Right.
they always say, I felt it in my heart.
Right,
You
right.
did not. You felt it in the soul.
Really?
And that's where that feeling comes. It's in the soul. Because the heart does only one thing. It pumps the fluid, the blood, through the system.
Okay.
That's all it does.
So this is not a connection with maybe the brain and the heart with respect to emotions.
No.
Because again, I'm sure more people believe that the brain is more like a computer
No,
than the soul.
no.
Okay.
Everything that we do, everything that we have ever done in all of the lifetimes. Now here we come in with reincarnation. Now religions will teach you this is the only life. That's a stupid thing to tell the people. We live lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. We're either living in the physical body as we living in this body, or we die and this body dies and we live in a spirit body. Jesus told us that we have two bodies. We have a physical body that we see in the mirror, and then we have a spiritual body. And the minute that this physical body dies, it gives birth to a spiritual body. And it gives birth. We instantly go into this other body and we continue living. The grave does not open up at some time and we walk out with a brand new suit on, which is what they tried to teach us when I was a kid. I walked out of church one time. I thought my father would kill me. As a little boy, I just knew better than that. And later on, Spirit explained to me that I was right. This is why this entity, this great teacher, has appeared to me. I often wondered why he appeared to me, talked to me, because I asked questions I wanted to know. And then later on, I found in the scripture where he says, "Ask and the door shall ask, and you shall what is it? Ask,
And the door shall open.
ask and the door shall open. Knock and the door shall open. Ask and you shall find." And I did. I got my answers.
Now you'd think with the gods creating the body that everything would be symmetrical. And in fact, our heart is not perfectly symmetrical. It really is off to the left.
Yeah, but everything that we've ever done, every experience we've ever had is recorded in the soul. It's just like a computer.
You were talking before about the brain, and it got me thinking. If you take a computer has many different parts. The processing part that does all the mathematical calculations, the CPU, that could be what's going on in our brain.
Okay.
The brain could be the CPU, but the hard drive would be in our soul because that's where everything is recorded.
Exactly.
Oh, interesting. That's a good analogy there.
Exactly.
Okay.
For instance, take a child
Okay.
that has a bad experience when they're small, a very bad experience. Say they fall in a cave or something, or fall in a well, when they're small. A horrible experience for a child. That experience is recorded in their soul. And let's say after that memory comes to the surface and it has nightmares. That could last them all of their life because the memory continues to come up from the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is the mind of the soul.
Okay.
Conscious mind is the mind of the physical body.
Okay.
See, don't forget we have two bodies now.
All right.
Subconscious mind is the mind of the spirit body, and the conscious mind is the mind of the physical body.
Okay.
You see?
All right.
So that we're dealing with two bodies here. And so when the physical body dies, it's gone. And the brain is gone.
Right.
And the memory of everything that we ever did is recorded in the soul. So if people think that they die and everything that they learned is here and they take it with them, they're wrong. It's in the soul.
See, mediumship proves that, because if someone goes to Reverend Hewitt for a reading, let's say I go to Reverend Hewitt for a reading, and my grandmother appears and explains something that happened in her life so that I can identify her, because I know the experience. Well, if when she died, her brain went into the ground. So how would she possibly, if memory is recorded in the brain, how could she possibly have any memory in the spirit world? It's the soul that goes to the spirit world. Therefore, the memory is recorded within the soul. And mediumship, because the medium can speak to the people who are in the other dimension, who have crossed over, proves this fact.
That's a good point, because if you think about it, and I've watched John Edwards' show a couple of times, there are definite signs and triggers that he uses to get the audience to acknowledge and recognize their family members or friends from the other side.
Right, it's like identification.
Absolutely.
And he insists on it.
And if they don't have the physical brain, where is it coming from?
Right, it's coming from their soul, because the memory of their identification, the evidence of what happened to them so that their loved ones in this dimension can recognize them, is recorded in their soul, not their brain.
I'd like to mention something here right now that happened to someone right in this area. This is several years ago, and there's a letter in my office right now, because I get a lot of letters from people, feedback I call it. And this was dealing with a young lady. She was about 23 years old, and they hadn't been married too long, and she was told in a reading right after they got married in my office. She came for a reading, and she was told in the reading, because everybody gets a tape recording of the reading, and she was told in this reading that come July, I believe the reading was either January or February, come July, her husband will be very interested in buying a motorcycle, and for her not to sign the papers for him to buy the motorcycle, because he can't buy the motorcycle on his own pay because the bank won't loan the money. He's not making enough money. But if she signs the paper, then he could buy the motorcycle. The two of them together can afford it. But anyway, she says, oh, don't worry about that. I'm not going to worry about that because he doesn't like motorcycles. I says, this is in July, not now. And sure enough, when July came, he became interested in a motorcycle because they went to a show where they were showing motorcycles. And he was telling her, don't believe in that stuff, blah, 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 blah. So before she would give in to sign, she took the tape to her priest. And he listened to it, and he says, throw the tape away, don't pay any attention to it.
Really?
Yeah. And this is in this area. And so she went home and threw it in the drawer. She didn't throw it away. And she gave in, and she signed the tape. She signed the paper, and he bought his favorite motorcycle.
Right.
And I don't know, a few weeks after that, he was cruising down the road somewhere over in, I don't know where it was, Lebanon, I think it was. And some truck came out in the road, and he hit the truck and went like a rocket over it. And he was instantly killed. And after that, she took the tape to the same person.
Oh, to the priest.
Forced him to listen to it again. And this time he said, well, there are some people that can do this. Well, she went down his throat practically. She said, why didn't you tell me that in the first place? Well, I don't know what was said after that, but
Wow.
the whole family came down on his head. And if this man had have told her in the first place what he told her the second time,
Right.
she would have listened. This is what the family told me.
Right. Right.
And so here was this young man who lost his life simply because of what he said, because you see, he did not want them to believe in this work. You see? Now, I've had a lot of priests from not around here, from other places come. This is something they don't want the people to know, and yet this is something that Jesus did himself. This man here, I proved it to him. It's all through the book.
I was at Barnes & Noble's last night, and I happened to pick up a book about women in the Bible, you know, the subject we talked about a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
And so I opened up the section about the medium of Endor. I wanted to see what this person had to say. And this is a woman, a Jewish woman who's she's a professor at the University of Chicago in their seminary there. And at the end of her article about what she had to say, describing the Bible story, she said that Zephaniah was an uncontrollable, unauthorized access to the divine. And this is the problem of mediumship. It's unauthorized by Orthodox religion because they don't want people to be able to know that.
Right.
And they can't control it. See, and that's their problem. They can't control what comes through. And this is why mediumship is such a threat to them, just as Reverend Hewitt was talking about.
But the medium does have some control, and some say, over how they are used.
Yes.
With respect to information.
It's the priesthood that can't control it.
Okay.
And saying that it's unauthorized.
No more or less than a church controlling anything any private individual does anywhere, I would suppose.
You see, as far as our soul being like a computer, he said to me, I'm talking about the great teacher, he said that he knew me before I was placed in the womb.
That was the same thing that was said to Jeremiah in the first chapter of Jeremiah. They said the same exact thing to him, and he was to be their medium.
Really?
Yes.
And I didn't even know what he was talking about until I found this in the Bible. And when I read that in the Bible, I said, Jesus, that's very similar to what was said to me. But at that time, I didn't even realize who that was talking to me, because he had not identified himself.
But again, to have that knowledge, to have known you before you came into the womb, if he doesn't have a physical operating brain, where's it coming from?
Yeah, where's it coming from?
You know, we're talking about the soul too, and we're talking about the heart, but we can't see the soul, can we?
That's right. You know, you can't. You can't. And unless you have second sight, you can't see the light around the person, and that light is coming from the soul. You see, the soul in each person is called the God, and the light is called the Lord.
Okay.
The light that's coming from the soul is called the Lord.
Okay.
You see?
So we have Lord and God all wrapped up in one.
Yes, I see the light around your body because I have second sight. I see the light around his body.
Okay.
And there are people I have been in the marketplace, for instance, or I've been in the shopping center, and the time that I went to a place on the West Coast one time, and I saw this man in a group of people, and I went over to him. He looked at me. We didn't even say a word to each other. We just went and put our arms around each other and embraced, because I saw the most beautiful light around this man, and he saw the light around me.
Isn't that something?
And we had this understanding. This is why Jesus selected the boys as his students. You see, there's one thing, and I'll bet you anything, there's not a soul out there watching this program that would ever give this any thought. This is why he did not select any of the men that were change makers in the square.
Oh, okay.
He turned their tables over. He was mad as hell at all of them because, you see, all of their mind, their thoughts were on money.
Okay.
See, these guys that were fishing down by the water, their focus was on fishing and feeding the family. They were down to earth, good men. He could see the light around them, and he went over to him and he says, I want you to follow me. I'll make you fishermen of men. He could see the light around them. This is the way I have selected people to be my students. This is why you were selected to be one of my students too, and him. There are people that come to my group, they'll go around asking everybody else, but they're afraid to ask me why I don't invite them to be a student.
Oh, okay.
And you know, I don't always tell them right up front, because sometimes I don't exactly know how to handle it,
Yeah.
because they're not even ready to accept the truth.
Right. Now, there's a whole area there, I understand, as far as the light
That's right.
coming from the soul,
Because-
emanating from the soul.
Because if they can't see the light,
Okay.
some of them think I'm lying to them.
Okay. So this is the light that you talk about, that I've maybe heard or some of our viewers have read, that could be actually photographed
Yes.
with a special camera.
Through Curlian photography.
That's
Right.
right.
Yeah.
That's the
It's
word I'm
there.
looking for. Absolutely.
People that are closed mind and people that are negative, like a person that's very evil, their light is dark, it looks bloody red.
Really?
Oh yeah, bloody red, it's with black in it.
And can someone's light change?
Well,
When they
theirs
change?
don't change very much.
Okay. But I'm saying, can somebody's light get, you've talked about people who have dim lights versus brighter lights.
I was traveling. I was going down to get, when I first started the church. We didn't have any money to make. We didn't have any money to have a printer, and so we would make up the program, and then I would take it down to one of those printing places in New London, you know, and on Friday, and of course they closed the door at 5 o'clock, regardless of how bad I needed it, and they didn't open on Saturday, and so I was flying. I really was breaking all speed limits. I was flying down that highway to get the program, and I was late, and I wasn't paying attention. I was watching the mirror, you know, and all of a sudden I watched the mirror, and the lights are blinking behind me, you know, and the guy didn't have his siren on, and I was, oh, Lord, here we go. And lights are flashing and everything else. And I said, oh, Lord, do something about it. I can't afford a speeding ticket. I can't afford a speeding ticket, and if he stops me and ties me up, I'm not even going to get there in time to get the program for Sunday. I'm really in trouble. I need some help. And so I pulled over. I pulled over to the side, and this guy, you know, he looked like a gorilla coming over to the car. By that time, I had my driver's license out. I says, all right, give me a ticket. I got to go. Where's the fire? And I says, there is no fire, officer. I says, I got to go get the church program for Sunday. I gave him my license, and you know something? He started shaking. He really did. He started shaking the minute he picked it up. And I didn't know him. He didn't know me, but he started shaking. But then I saw somebody stand inside of him.
Oh, no.
But he didn't see that person. And then I said, oh, you know, I let out a big sigh. I thought I was alone. and he handed me back my license, and he said, I don't know why I'm doing this. He handed me back the license, and he says, anybody else would give you a ticket. And he says, go on and get whatever you're doing. But he says, if you keep driving like this, somebody else will throw the book at you.
Wow.
That's what he said.
Wow.
And so I drove along until I got him out of sight.
Right.
And I speeded up, went on
Of
the
course.
run.
Well, I guess we all kind of do that, probably.
And then when I got back, I told my neighbor across the street, and I said, that was a close call yesterday. She said, what happened? I said, I got stopped by this guy, and she said, describe him. She said, he would give his grandmother a ticket, his wife a ticket. She says, don't tell me he didn't give you a ticket. I said, no, he didn't. She said, well, you certainly got somebody up there or somewhere
Yeah, right.
protecting you.
Right.
But they came through.
That's a funny
I
story.
felt good all weekend that somebody was protecting me. But they're there. They're unseen, just like the oxygen in this room.
Like our soul is unseen.
Absolutely. And the light around the person is unseen. So this is how Jesus selected his students.
Okay.
But he was disappointed in them because there was only 3 of them that developed to be the instruments of the Spirit, Peter, James, and John.
Right.
And
Sidney
Sidney has
had
been with
something.
me long enough
Right.
that he's seen some of the people develop, and some of them develop to a point, and then their ego, they got a pregnant ego, as I call it, and they didn't want to go any further. They went off on their own. There's a lot of them, and some of them, they're hearing my voice right now.
Oh, no. Now, could you imagine just alone the experience that you just shared, going through life, not having, as you call it, a pregnant ego, because of maybe the thoughts going to your head that somehow you could evade law enforcement, because you have help and from the spirit world and what have you. And I would imagine some people, if they had that experience, would turn it into that. Their heads would become huge. Their egos would become huge. But you certainly don't. You don't convey that at all.
Listen, since tonight is kind of a smorgasbord of a program, I do want to bring this in.
Okay.
Because last Friday night when we were here, something happened during that night when I left here. I really want to do this. This one of my students is a great person, and he keeps saying that I've helped him so much. I would never reveal over the air the first reading. And when he told me about it, I was so embarrassed. It's something like, because you see, I can't control what is said. When he ever told me what I said to him the first reading, I said, oh, God, don't tell me I said that. He says, you did. I have it on tape. It was so embarrassing. And anyway.
Was it about you? Was it about him?
Oh, it was about him.
Oh, okay. All right.
He went and checked it out, and he said it was 100%. Anyway, he went and he found a picture behind the cashier at a little store. It was not for sale. He stood there looking at it, and he said to the lady, look, there's a special person that I know of. I want to buy that for him. And she says, not for sale. He said, yes, it is. I want to buy it. I'm not leaving until you sell me that picture. And I understand that somebody in the studio here took a picture of it.
Yes.
Do we have that picture ready in the system?
Well, yes, the next morning, Saturday morning.
There it is, Carl.
We found this on the fence going into my office. There it is. What a beautiful picture.
So somebody left that picture on your fence.
This, as he said, it reminded him of me because many times when I was a kid, I spent so much time by myself, late in the night, and I would be wondering, asking myself, what am I doing here? Because it was like I was beating my head against a stone wall. I couldn't get anybody to understand me. And it was like, and I have to admit it, I wanted to commit suicide so many times. In fact, I came so close to it, and the voice would said, you can't do that. You can't do that. You have too much work to do. And then later on it said, we have too much work to do.
Oh, wow.
We have too much work to do. And then they started saying, there are people waiting in the future for you to teach them. And I would say, I don't have the education to teach. Don't forget, I had to quit school to find some answers. I don't have the education to teach anybody. And they said, we'll teach you what to teach them. And I have in my hand here the declaration of principles that they gave me to use in the church. And I'd like to share some of these with...
Now, these are some of the founding principles of your church.
Yes.
Then I wanted to make a comment about your church, too, because somebody approached me about a week ago asking me about this church.
Church is a church is a church.
Right, right.
See, I don't like the word church. I don't like the word psychic. And
Go ahead, share some of those, if you
but
would.
you see, I don't like the word preacher. I like the word teacher.
Right.
I like the word school. Because you see, to me, Jesus was a teacher,
Right.
not a preacher. He came to the world to teach the gifts of the Spirit, and he said, what you see me do, you can do. even greater things shall you do. And he said that because he was able to do remote viewing. He could see the future, and he knew that people would become more educated, and he was hoping that they would be able to understand what he taught, and they would be able to teach the world that. But that was not the case. They went backwards instead of forwards.
Right.
You see, religion has been teaching people ignorance, fear, and superstition. They've controlled the people's mind and they shut it down. This is why we use such a small amount of the brain today. Because you see, if we go back, let's say go back many lifetimes ago, and that was when the brain was shut down, that memory is in the soul today. If, let's say if we go back, when was the schools shut down? 14th century? Come on, you know.
Which schools are you talking about?
The schools they shut down. They burned the libraries. When was that?
Oh, they burned the Library of Alexandria in 391.
Okay, back at that time, they tried to shut all the schools down. All right. Okay, so when they preached that they wanted to shut all the schools down.
Right.
Okay, the memory of that is in the souls of the people.
Okay.
You see?
All right.
And so if they were trying to get the people to become ignorant in those days, that same memory is in the soul today.
Okay.
And so that shut part of the brain down.
All right.
Let's say you were a medium in those days. You had the ability to heal people.
Right.
Doing the same thing that Jesus did, laying your hands on a person that
Right.
was sick, transferring the energy of God that is within you into that person's body.
Okay.
And so some priests come along and said, that's the work of the devil. Put fear in your mind. You stopped it.
Okay.
That part of the brain shut down, went to sleep.
Okay.
And so that part of your soul shut down, went to sleep. You
All right.
understand?
Okay.
So now here you are in this body, and so that part of your soul is programmed to keep that part of your brain shut down.
I see.
Get it?
Okay.
So there's only a small part of the brain working. This is the way it is. The computer operates the brain.
All right. Now, Sidney, you had a couple of things I think you wanted to share with us next. Do you still want to?
Well, we're kind of far gone from that. At
We
this
are,
point.
okay.
Yeah.
I notice you always have a way to add to what's being
Right.
talked about.
Let
Okay.
me just share. This is something. It says, here's one thing dealing with my church. It says, we know one's final awakening occurs when one accepts and empowers the truth of Jesus' statement. Is it not written in your law? This is what Jesus is saying now. Is it not written in your law, I said, ye are gods? You'll find that in John 10th chapter, 34th verse. The God within is the spiritual body of each human being. It will come forward to manifest one's desires once it has been empowered through thought or prayer directed within. Jesus taught the kingdom of God is within you. We'll find that in Luke 17:21. I said ye are gods, meaning everyone
Right.
is God.
Who else could he have possibly been speaking to? Who?
He was speaking to everybody.
Right. Right.
And the priest made him the only one and only God. And as they have been telling me lately, that all of these wars that we've ever had, created by religion, holy wars, and all these people that die are dying in the name of God.
So
Do you
this
have
is
something to add there? You're going silent on us.
this is a list of some of the principles of your church. Could you explain to our viewers how your church is not like all the other churches that are out there?
Gifts of the Spirit Church is a teaching ministry. It is a healing ministry. We do not have all of these other I hate to use those negative words, but for instance, Declaration of Principles, number 1, we know See, we have a knowingness system,
Okay.
not a belief system.
All right.
That covers the whole thing. We know God is within ourselves. It is energy which has created the universe through thought, which is infinite intelligence. Every human being has a soul, a portion of divine energy located beneath the breastbone in the middle of one's chest. The soul is the spirit body, and its duplicate is the flesh body. You can find that in Corinthians if people would read the book. This is why there are certain religions don't want people to read the Bible. You read the Bible, you're going to have questions.
Well, I've watched many different religious shows, and actually have had a Bible there in front of me just to test to see what's being said, if it reigns true to the context that they're trying to apply that verse to. And many times they take the verse out of context, and if you had read the whole chapter and seen what it really meant, then it was twisted and turned and it lost its meaning. But most people, I don't think, really do understand the Bible
They don't.
cover to cover.
They don't.
So they just leave it up to the priests to tell them what the message is, where it's coming from, and what to do. And if nothing else, I have learned from having met Sidney Schwartz here that it's a good thing to read the Bible cover to cover and to really know the context of what's being said in there, because anybody can pull anything out of any story at any time and try to make a relevant point or a moral issue out of it.
Let me give you an example of what you're talking about. It was what I was going to read before. This is in the 17th chapter of the first book of Kings that deals with Elijah. And it says in verse 8, "And the word of the Lord came to him, saying," meaning Elijah, "Arise and go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and stay there. Behold, I have commanded a widow there to provide for you." So he arose, and he went to Zarephath, and when he came to the gate of the city, behold, a widow was gathering sticks. And he called to her and said, "Please get me a little water in a jar, that I may drink." And as she was going to get it, he called to her and said, "Please bring me a piece of bread in your hand." But she said, "As the Lord your God lives, I have no bread, only a handful of flour in the bowl and a little oil in the jar." The phrase I wanted to talk about was her response, "As the Lord your God lives." Reverend Hewitt was mentioning before that the auric field that comes from the soul is called your Lord.
Right.
If you die, that light is no longer around your body. This is what this phrase means, "as the Lord your God lives." Because she had clairvoyant sight, she could see the light around the body. She could see he was a medium, and therefore she went and did what she desired. So many people could get confused when they read this, because unless you really understand psychic science, you have so much of this book is based on that you just read right through it and you don't understand it.
Right.
And this is why some people have a hard time understanding the Bible, because they don't have the knowledge of psychic science that goes with it.
Okay. Now, maybe towards the end of the show, we could share with some of our viewers some of the affirmations that you've prepared with respect to having the physical body speak to the spiritual body, and
Empowering it.
empowering the light. I was going to say
Right.
energizing, but empowering is a better word.
Right.
To empower the light that is around you.
A short message to the viewers out there: religion has taken God out of the person and put him or her in a piece of real estate in the sky. And when your focus is out there in the sky, this is dormant. This is asleep. It's not doing you a bit of good, because when you're praying to somebody out there or some image out there, you're not getting any results. Do you ever wonder why your prayers are never answered? If you learn to go within yourself, this is why Jesus said, "I'm going to my Father." He's going to the Father within himself. There is a Father within ourselves. This is the Spirit within ourselves. It's the God within ourselves. It becomes so simple. My God, people, think for yourself. If you know what he told me, he said, "Go out and teach and get the people to think for themselves." And he says, tell them plainly, blatantly, if they have to go and take what you're teaching to a priest, minister, rabbi, anybody wearing a collar, if you have to take it to them and run it by them, then they are showing their ignorance. And I don't want to see it. I have seen it for 2,000 years. And he sounded angry when he said that to me. He says, tell them, don't show their ignorance to me. Tell them to listen to what you're saying, because you're carrying out my teaching.
You know, we had a viewer write in to making_known@yahoo.com, and that viewer had mentioned, with respect to the soul, that they grew up being raised devoutly Catholic, evidently, but could never believe that everything that we needed to learn, we could learn in one lifetime. And in fact, thought that it was plausible for reincarnation to exist, because there is so much to learn. And it does stand to reason that this soul, which is like a computer or a recorder of sorts, will continue with you to store that information up as you gain more knowledge.
Well, one of the letters that came to me was from a young lady, probably 14 or 15, and she said that her parents allow her to do her own thinking, but they think that she's crazy, and they were brought up Catholic, and that she asked them, she says, well, this program makes more sense than anything she's ever heard. And she asked them, she says, well, it makes sense to her. How could you possibly learn everything in one lifetime? She said she accepts reincarnation. And that brings up another point. So many people call and ask me this, and this is the way that they've explained it to me. You go on to the other dimensions that you have already prepared yourself for here, and then there comes a time, approximately 75 years in the other dimensions. You can stay longer if you want to, but usually the minimum amount of time there, if you desire to come back, then you choose someone of your family. That is, if you have the knowledge to do so, and the knowledge is stored in your soul, you choose somebody of your family, that is, if you know how to do that. And if a woman gets pregnant, her light field around her body shows a different color than the off-white, which is the normal color that it is. It goes into a color of gold rose color. It's hard to describe that color. And that is the only thing that changes the color of the auric field. And everyone in the world of spirit will know that this woman is now pregnant. And if that particular soul has chosen this woman as a vehicle to come back, then the soul stays in the light field around this woman until she's gone into it 85 days?
110, I thought.
No.
90? I forget.
95 weeks.
Days.
95 days. And then there's a window there that then that spirit lowers its vibration down 7 levels and then enters through the solar plexus, and the minute it does, the baby kicks, starts moving its hands and feet, because that's the first time that there's a new energy in the body, that little baby. And it kicks and moves itself around because it's not used to that energy. And it seats itself underneath the breastbone. It's a natural thing. It seats itself right there. And then when the baby is born, it takes on the genetics of its past life and the genetics of its parents, of the chromosomes of its father and mother.
Okay. So we are all combinations of
Yeah.
our past lives and our genetics in this lifetime.
And years ago, in some cases, the imprint is what they told me. The imprint of the other life is more powerful than the genetics of the parents.
Really?
And let's say the mother and father would have dark hair, dark eyes, and the child comes along and the child is blonde,
Right.
blue eyes, and the father is ignorant of all of this and thinks that the mother slept with a
Oh, no.
light-haired man, kills the mother and kills the child.
Oh, we hope not.
Well, they said they did that years ago.
Really?
Yeah, it was just ignorance. And the priest would tell them that this is what happened.
Oh, my goodness.
Religion caused the death of the wife, yeah. Because you see, from what they've taught me, if you go all the way back to the biblical times, there was always the gifted people that would go into trance, and you could go and sit in their presence and talk directly to the people in the other dimension that would teach them, just as they do today.
Okay.
You understand?
Yeah.
Now, you have been to the seances, and you have seen genuine seances take place.
Yes.
You have seen these pictures appear. You have seen messages. You have heard messages come through the trumpets. No hocus pocus. I won't allow any of that in my place, because there are fake mediums out there. And they had the same thing way back there, but the priest passed a law on this. There was a time, I remember some old man told me years ago that they passed a law that they would never allow any more prophecies to be done.
Really?
Oh yeah, I forgot when
Yes.
that.
What are people afraid of? What are they afraid of?
They wanted to control the people. This is when they took God and put him up there in a piece of real estate in the sky.
It was the same thing. They didn't want uncontrollable, unauthorized access to the divine knowledge.
Okay.
So they just said that prophecy ended. That's when they closed the Bible. Christianity, they picked a date. I forget if it was at the Council of Nicaea or sometime around that time, and they just said, that's it. And they said, there is no more prophecy.
And then it became a crime,
Right.
punishable by some form, I'm sure.
Right. By death, mostly.
Wow.
And the greatest medium that has ever walked this earth, and I want the people that's watching this pro to understand why the word is called medium. A medium is one that is between the two worlds, between the world of spirit and the world of the physical. When that person is in the altered state, there are some people that are so stupid about this work, they think I'm turned on all the time, walking down this street and I see, all of this going on all the time. Good Lord. Give me a break.
Now, what about the idea of, you hear people talking about an old soul or soulmates or,
Give me a break.
What
We're
is
all the
that?
same age.
okay,
All the souls were created at the same time, at the time of the Big Bang.
We all
the
go
souls
back
were
to the
created.
same time.
really? Okay,
Anybody say, well, he's an old soul.
okay,
If
all right.
if you go back into creation in the second chapter of Genesis here, let's see if I can find it. And chapter 21 of the second chapter of Genesis, it says, so the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. And then he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh at the place. And the Lord fashioned into a woman the rib which he had taken from the man and brought her to the man. This is a very nice little story which theologians use to suppress women, saying that a man was made first and women came second. In reality, this word that's translated in English as rib is the Hebrew word, whatever it is, which I can't pull up right now, can't remember right now. The only place it's ever translated rib is in this one chapter. Every place else is translated as side. What actually happened here was that God separated souls that originally were both male and female. And that what happened was that they split apart. And again, the souls were the male part was positive, the female part was negative, and that's referring to a polarity of electricity, not good or bad.
Right. We've talked about that in another show.
Right.
Okay.
So this is what they were talking about. That God pulled these aspects apart. He pulled the female part away from the male part. Okay, and that's how male and female were created. Had nothing to do with a rib, and of course had nothing to do with male supremacy.
Okay.
But yet in the New Testament, they talk about it all the time, that Adam came first, and therefore women have to obey their husbands, and they can't talk in church, and they can't do this, and they can't do that. But that was all created to control women, because women were more psychically gifted than the men, and they didn't want that unauthorized female medium to say the wrong thing at the wrong time.
Now, speaking of saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, or not saying certain things, it was brought to my attention that there's something going on with a diocese not too far from here,
Right. Well,
with respect to background
I
checks?
heard it on the talk. I listen to talk radio quite a bit, and I live in the New York City area, so I was listening to WABC this morning, and they announced on the news several times that the Archdiocese of New York has decided that they were no longer going to do background checks of the people who are the priests in their diocese to see if there's any illegal activity in their background, because they felt that it was an invasion of privacy, and they were concerned that what would happen to the information. So people were kind of questioning why they decided to do that.
So this is a formal church decree that basically says they're not going to
That's right.
dive into past information or past history.
Right. It seems that since the scandals of the Catholic Church are no longer in the headlines, they figure they can get away with it now.
Oh, okay. So they can kind of sneak that in, so then while people aren't paying attention to that and they're paying attention to the war,
Right.
they can, they'll stop that process.
Right. Exactly.
You know, I had a question with respect to the war. And I know sometimes it's hard to focus on this show and come in here and do this when there's so much going on in the world out there that is very sad. And one of the questions that came to me when I was watching one of the broadcasts one night, and they were interviewing a soldier who was in some place in Iraq, and he was expressing to the interviewer that when the going got tough, what he did was he simply closed his eyes and prayed to God. Well, that's not an unusual scene, and we see that and we hear that often. But my question had been, if we know that there isn't a God in the sky, and somebody is praying to God to help them, get me out of a fix, help protect me, keep me safe, whatever it is they're wishing for, will Spirit still help them, even though Spirit knows that they don't know? I don't know if that maybe is a question more for you, Carl, than anybody else. And I probably shouldn't have thrown this in, and we only have a few minutes left, but I thought maybe you could address that.
There's always someone there, just as we have friends right here on the earth plane. We have friends. Okay. But there's always spirit friends that are with us, you know, providing we are good people.
Okay.
You know, the law of attraction. You know, if you're a good person, there are good people that's in your life. You know what I mean? Yeah. The spirit people are more sensitive than physical people.
Okay.
And they know our whereabouts and that type of thing. The best thing for a person to do is to pray to the Lord God of their being, their own being, and when they do that, that signal, that prayer, the essence of it goes out into the ether waves, and it reaches a tremendous amount of other people.
Okay. With that, I think this would be the perfect time to show, and perhaps the two of you could take turns reading the two affirmations that we have here, and then I think we'll probably wrap the show after that.
Good idea.
So if we could see the first affirmation that they brought with them tonight.
What you would do is you would close your eyes, you would cover your eyes so you can't have any light on them, and you would say these words, Lord, and focus on your chest, in the middle of your chest where your soul is. Okay. You concentrate on your soul and say, Lord God of my being, unto the Father or Mother within, Come forward this moment, this hour, and bring forth the Christ that is within me. Release the enzymes from my brain into my bloodstream, that my body, your temple, be healed. So be it. So be it is like hitting the return button on the enter button on the computer,
Okay.
or the return button, and it makes the soul do what you just asked it to do.
Lord God of my being, unto the Father within, come forward this moment, this hour, and bring forth the Christ that is within me. Go into my memory bank of my soul and erase now and forevermore all memories of my victimization. Replace all of these memories with love for all mankind. So be it.
And you can reword this any way you need to.
Okay.
You know, if any specific thing that you needed to work on,
Okay.
you could rework that in there.
It's
For-
important, excuse me, it's
I'm sorry.
important to keep your focus on who it is you're speaking to.
Okay. I was just going to remind our viewers that if they missed this and weren't able to write it down or to copy it, they can definitely contact the Adelphia Studio in Norwich to get copies of the shows for their very own
or they
to
can-
actually try these
Or they can
affirmations.
email us, and I'll send them the affirmations.
You can also email us at making_known@yahoo.com. You could also pick up the book, My First Encounter with an Angel, Revelations of Ancient Wisdom by Sidney Schwartz and Carl Hewitt. And at the very end of the show, there will be an address and a phone number for you to contact should you have any questions after the show that you weren't able to call in to ask about.
And we have a service at the church Sunday at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. I believe we also advertise or promote that service during the regular public access viewing hours. So look for that, and we will keep you in
I haven't
tune.
seen it.
And thank you, Sidney Schwartz, for joining me. And thank
Thank
you,
you.
Carl Hewitt.
My pleasure.
And thank you, viewers. Until next time, be well.